Good morning, everybody. I'm always so happy to see all of you here so early in the morning. I'm very appreciative of it. I have a diabetic dog, so I get up at 5:30 every morning to take care of her. And so 7 a.m. is not, I've already had an hour and a half in, so it doesn't feel that early for me, but I know that it can be early for so many of us. So I really appreciate the fact that you're all here. I want to take a little bit of a departure today. For the last 2 weeks or so, we've been talking about what I call our relationship rights. And I wanted to introduce that idea to you for two reasons. One is that during this global pandemic, one of the things that we know that we as human beings need now more than ever is a sense of feeling physically and emotionally safe, and a sense of feeling connected. And our ability to feel safe physically and emotionally, and our ability to feel connected right now are really compromised. But both of those things are so essential to our survival and to our wellness at all levels of our being. So I have found that over the course of the last 6 weeks or so, I've been doing a lot of teaching and training on resiliency, mostly as it relates to our relationships. So about 2 weeks ago, I thought it would be interesting to explore our relationship rights. And our relationship rights are very, very similar to our rights as human beings. We're all born with fundamental rights, but we're also born with fundamental rights related to our relationships. And many of us don't claim those rights. And so we've been moving through, there's a list of 25. We moved through the first 10 over the course of the last 2 weeks. If you missed those sessions, you can go to the Recovery Bank YouTube channel. All of those sessions are there for you to view if you miss those. But I want to take a little bit of a detour, and I want to talk about something that I think you can all relate to. And this content today is related to relationship, except it's related to how you relate to yourself. And I want to tell you how this topic came about. A couple of days ago, I noticed that a dear friend and colleague of mine posted her most recent podcast. Her name is Adina Laver, and she has a podcast called The Courage to Be Curious. And she's taught me a lot about curiosity. So Adina believes that maintaining a spirit of curiosity almost always allows fear and anxiety to drop out of the picture. In other words, if I can be curious about something, I can move myself from an anxious frame of mind into a calmer frame of mind. So her curiosity question on her latest podcast was, what do you need? When I heard that that was the topic, I almost pressed stop, because as soon as she asked the question, I felt my own anxiety welling up. What do you need? Meaning, what do I need? I am very accustomed, and over the course of the last 6 weeks, I have asked many, many people in my life, what do you need? What can I do for you? How can I be of service? But when I turn that question back onto myself, what do I need? I'm panic stricken, or I go into a paralysis of sorts. I can't think straight. I can't speak straight, because there's a fundamental fear that goes all the way back and into my childhood about not being able to say what I need. And if you live long enough not being able to say what you need, you get disconnected from even having an understanding or an awareness of what you need. So I knew that what I needed in the moment of listening to the podcast is as uncomfortable as it was. I needed to stay with the question, Christine, what do you need? And that's what I want to focus on today. What do you need? So I want to take a moment and I want to just bring up my slides. I'm only going to call upon a couple of them today. The first one being this idea that there is no stress in curiosity. This is something that I just want you to hold in your heart. Think about it. Think about those times when you were a child and you were really curious about something. The first image that comes to mind for me is being about 7 or 8 years of age and being in the backyard with a shovel because I had just learned about archaeology in grade school. And I couldn't believe that there were people who, as their profession, dug up the earth in search of other lands and pastimes and other ways of living. And I wanted so desperately to dig up my backyard to discover all of those things. I dug for hours and I dug for days, and it became an obsession of mine. But it was something about which I had profound curiosity. So in all of that time that I spent digging, I was never afraid. I was never anxious. There is no stress in curiosity. Watch a child getting really curious about, why is the sky blue? Why does it rain? How do flowers grow in the spring? How does something work? And you'll notice that they're not afraid. At some time in our lives, something happens, something shifts, where our curiosity is really turned down. And in some ways, it's just turned off. Researchers say that that occurs approximately around the 3rd grade, when our very, very natural desire for curiosity, our very natural inclination for curiosity, is kind of turned down because of the introduction of having to learn how to multiply and divide. That suddenly there is this new focus. The brain has to be engaged in a way that it hadn't been engaged in before. It's almost like that left side of the brain, the side of the brain that deals with logic, gets turned up really loud. And our creativity and our curiosity becomes very tempered. As a parent, I noticed that once the kids hit 3rd grade, they weren't bringing home the coloring pages anymore that they worked on at school. They weren't bringing home all of the arts and crafts as often. And I certainly wasn't getting the painted Happy Mother's Day mug at Mother's Day. So there was a real difference in curiosity. But we're born hardwired for it, for curiosity and for creativity. So what would it mean if we were to allow ourselves, give ourselves permission for curiosity to be present, even about the things that scare us? When I get curious about the global pandemic, my stress level completely drops. In fact, try to force yourself to have a spirit of curiosity and a spirit of fear at the same time, or a spirit or mindset of curiosity and a mindset of negativity at the same time. It's really difficult, if not impossible. So there's no stress in curiosity. And so I don't want there to be any stress today as we think about What do I need? And what do I need now? What I needed at the beginning of this global pandemic 6 or 7 weeks ago, when it really came onto my radar, is very different from what I need now. What I needed 2 weeks ago is very different from what I need now. One of our fundamental rights as a human being, and our fundamental rights in the context of our relationships, is that we have the right, each of us, we have the right to express what we need. What we need physically, what we need emotionally, what we need relationally, what we need in terms of our professional lives or our work in the world, what we need creatively. We have that right. And if you're here, there's a very strong possibility, again, that at some point in your lifetime, you were instructed or directed, whether it was in a very overt way or a very covert way, that it wasn't safe to say what you needed. Or if you did say what you needed, those people around you couldn't or didn't provide it. They either ignored you, you didn't feel seen, you didn't feel heard, or that there was some sort of punishment or retribution present when you spoke what you needed. This is why this question can feel so jarring for so many of us. And if you're here, again, you likely ask this question often of others, and you're very, very happy to provide. But when you turn the question back on yourself, you might find that it causes some discomfort. So let's get curious about this question. Here's what I'd like to do today. I want to use the following areas of our life as human beings as forms of contemplation. So for each of these levels of who we are, I'm just going to ask you to close your eyes, and I'm going to sort of guide you through some questions. And I just want you to focus on what comes up for you. In other words, don't search too hard for the answer. Just notice what comes up. Here's what I know. And this is what Adina's podcast really taught me just a couple of days ago. What I needed 6 weeks ago is very different from what I need now. 6 weeks ago, when this all hit, and I knew that I was going to be homebound for an indefinite period of time, the first thing that happened was I went into a panic about my work, because almost all of my work, all of my teaching and training happens in a live situation in person. And I thought, I'm not going to have work. My clients are going to postpone or suspend these accounts. Then you start thinking about, how is this going to affect my well-being, my finances? Will I even be able to do this work? On and on and on and on and on. So I really got super focused on, okay, how can I do what I do in this forum, in this sort of online forum from home? And I really put my head to the grindstone, and I really didn't look up until probably late last week, when I had the realization that I had driven myself to the point of physical pain. I had also driven myself to distraction, not really wanting to confront what a global pandemic meant for me as a human being, meant for my life, my relationships. I didn't want to look at that. That was way too painful. I felt too raw, not ready to really look at that. So there's lots of different ways that we can find that we're distracting ourselves from something that, quite frankly, might be the scariest thing that any of us have ever experienced. In my body, I have an autoimmune condition that when I'm in a flare-up, it feels like the entire inside of my body is on fire. And as each day unfolded, I could feel the flame getting turned up, hotter and hotter. And just until I reached a point where I realized something has to change for me physically. I need to do something different. I need to think differently about how I'm managing the stress of this pandemic. 6 weeks ago, I really needed to run hard. I don't need to do that now. So I just offer that as an example of what was happening with me physically and how those needs have changed over the course of the last 6 weeks. So I want to invite you to close your eyes. And if closing your eyes feels uncomfortable, just maybe soften your gaze and bring the eyes down. And I want you to ask yourself right now, at a physical level, what do I most need? What do I need in this body? What do I need in terms of sleep? What do I need in terms of movement? And remember, this is not about what should I need. What do I need? What do I need in terms of nourishment? What I'm eating, drinking. What do I need to do in terms of any physical conditions I have? The body speaks. It's always communicating with us, always. If it could speak right now, what is the number one thing it needs? And whenever you're ready, open your eyes. So I'm really curious I'm very curious if any of you could just share what that experience was like. And I need this morning Earl Grey tea as opposed to coffee, and by habit, that's the first thing I do is I make coffee. And I'm really trying to walk this talk. So I was like, what do you need? I need tea today. So what came up for you during that contemplation? You can unmute yourself.
Hi, Christine. It's Helen.
Hi, good
I
morning.
need, good morning. I a lot was coming up for me. A lot was coming up for me around moving. I need to move. It was very clear, and no matter where I was going, because the taking care of myself with what I'm putting in my body is working, but I am not moving.
Mm,
But because I've been moving my heart, my soul, my brain, everything to try to um, actually assist in saving livelihoods during the global pandemic in a whole different way, so I have so much of my attention is there, and I am not paying attention to moving.
mhm.
That's it.
If you were to dig a little bit deeper, and I were to you ask your body, how does your body need to move right now?
It needs to stretch. It
Yeah,
needs to not be contracted. It needs to open up.
yeah,
it,
yeah,
it need it's not, I'm not even thinking in terms of falling away from my yoga practice, or it's frustrating because of Pilates training that I was doing prior to the pandemic hitting with a trainer in person, and that connection, I think, to other human beings is what helps me, so it's like I also have a tendency to put everybody else and everything else in the universe first
mhm.
to begin with, so there's a lot in there. But I think to stretch, to not be contracted, to open up is the best way I could answer that.
Yeah, that's why I use the word movement as opposed to exercise,
Yeah.
because I completely resonate with what you're saying. I don't need to exercise right now. In fact, I think that would cause damage.
Yeah.
I don't have the resources for that, the energetic resources for that, but I need to move. And
Right.
that might mean between my tasks, taking
Mm,
Stella out for a walk if it's around the block
right.
during every break. So she's walking like 6 times a day, you know, just because I need to move. And when you use the word exercise, it evokes something really different.
Right.
It's like, no, not that, not now. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Welcome.
Anyone else? What does the body need? I don't know what just happened with my lighting. I think it's just the morning light has changed. So it is what it is. bear with it. Uh, all right, well then let's go to the next category of need. Let's see. Share this slide. Again, I'll ask you to just close your eyes. And now we're going to explore what we need emotionally. What do I need emotionally right now? Which might be different from what you needed several weeks ago. It might be different from what you needed yesterday. Perhaps it's emotional safety. Perhaps it's emotional connection. Perhaps it's emotional solitude, especially for those of us who are living together with one or more people, individuals all the time. Maybe it's emotional distancing. Maybe it's emotional boundaries. Maybe it's emotional attention. And again, whenever you're ready, open your eyes. The emotional attention part was not meant to evoke, oh, I need you to pay attention to me emotionally. It was really about, do I need to pay attention to how I'm feeling emotionally? Because one of the things that we often will do, especially if we're caregivers, like what a great time, what a perfect opportunity for us as caregivers, especially if we're codependent caregivers, to just like step up into the plate and martyr ourselves for the sake of others. I mean, that could feel really good right now. And it's a merciful form of denying ourselves of our own emotion, because we might be having a lot of big feelings about what's happening and just really not wanting to touch that. I recently read a poem, and I don't have access to it right now, but I'll share it with you maybe next week. It's a David White poem. Actually, it's more of an essay than it is a poem, where he talks about the mercy of denial. Like, many of us can have a lot of shame and guilt about how we were in denial, or for how long we were in denial, or how quickly we can go into denial. Like it's a highly honed skill that we have, a very polished skill that we have. But wow, this piece really opened my eyes to those times in my life, almost on every count, when I was in hard denial, that was an act of mercy. Because if I wasn't, I would never be able to handle the reality of what was really going on. And so sometimes I might need emotional distancing, emotional protection. Sometimes I need emotional distancing and protection from the anxiety and the overwhelm and the chaos of those people I'm closest to, those people around me. So when you ask yourself, if there was just one thing, and you ask your emotional self, what do I most need now? What arises? I'd love to hear. Again, you can unmute yourself. Anybody?
Hi, I'm Liza.
Hi, Liza.
And I could say definitely a couple of events that happened in the last week. I probably needed emotional awareness, which I did get. I was very aware of my emotions in the situation, in a couple of situations, and then maybe even some emotional distancing, because then I kind of had to, put that on the shelf. That that moment was past. Because something happened at my job that kind of scared me. There was an event that happened, and I did have some fear around it. I mean, I took some steps to like allay my fear, and I had a lot of people tell me that no, nothing bad is going to personally happen to me, and they took care of the situation at work, that nothing bad was going to happen to the facility or anything. So I was very aware of that. And then when I got home that night, and by the time I went to bed, then I had a call in the middle of the night, because I volunteer for something that, from someone, who is going through not only, their experience of addiction, but their experience of addiction in this time with all this other stuff going on. And then the emotional awareness was that man, this is just making this harder, and I don't even have any answers for this guy, not only because it's 3:30 in the morning and I'm not, I really can't even think of anything, but they live in another state, in a different state from Pennsylvania, and I don't even know what resources they have. But then the emotional awareness I did have was that I don't think this person expected me to have an answer. They just wanted to get their stuff out. And I don't know if I was the 10th person they told about their situation or the first person. But, I had that emotional awareness that, you can't fix things for people sometimes. And while it was kind of, made me emotionally, feel powerless, but then I felt at peace with it. I don't have to, I'm not expected to fix this for this person. I was just expected to be, just to listen to their explanation of the situation and what was going on. So those two things had me really, emotionally aware and that kind of thing. And then I kind of needed to put both of them up on the shelf because the scary situation was past, even though I wasn't involved with it, but it kind of came back this weekend. But now I think it really might be over with, hopefully. And then the other thing, I mean, is that there has to be a little bit of detachment. I in that I have to realize I can't fix things for people, and it's okay to feel a little like emotionally maybe even sad about that I couldn't really be of any kind of service except to listen, and maybe that was the best service to give. I don't know. So I guess an emotional awareness and then detachment in the sense that I gotta like put those things kind of up on the shelf because I can't let it like take over me. That's all I have.
That's a lot. It reminds me of having a friend call yesterday who is a person that I perceive as a person of great strength, and she was really suffering. And there were two things going on as I was listening. One, the louder voice was, what can I say to help her? Or to diminish the suffering that she's feeling. And there really wasn't anything I could say. I could not think of anything that I could say to make this situation different. In other words, my level of discomfort with her suffering was off the charts. So one of the things I do when I really start to feel like I I have to help this person. I have to help this person. So I had the phone in one hand. I sit on my hand. I have to physically sit on a hand. It's sort of like, it's, you know, like when your hands are tied, there's nothing you can do. Or sit on your hands, or zip up your lips, whatever it is. I knew that in any kind of attempt that I would make to try to help her, it would have been very transparent that the help or the words that I was about to speak were not coming from a place of really helping her, but more out of, I'm finding it hard to bear this discomfort that you're feeling. And when I look back on that, that was a tough conversation. I had to sit on my hand because I knew I could feel it. I was just on the precipice of jumping in. And later I realized really what she wasn't calling me for help at all. She was calling me just to tell me what was going on. Like I will often call people just to say what's going on. And so I get it, that call at 3:30, and having the awareness that there's nothing I can say here. I can't fix this. And maybe I'm not meant to. Maybe I'm just meant to just hear it. I think that that's tough for a lot of us. I'm just guessing, but I think that if you're here, that is difficult. So thank you for that.
Hi, Christine. My name is Kelly.
Hi.
So I would answer that question. What do I most need right now is, I would say for myself, is to be of sound mind. And that's not something I can do by myself. And you use the word connected, like staying connected. And that is absolutely what I'm doing and what I need right now to feel safe, to have reassurance from about 3 people that I'm with every day, that everything is okay, that I'm okay, that it's going to be okay. And then to just find a little something to do to take my mind off where I can go, I just need to feel safe and be of sound mind. So to what you said, stay connected, and being connected is absolutely what I need most right now, and it is happening. So it's very nice to say that I'm not searching for that. And so I like the words you use, like staying connected and getting connected, because that's very important to me. Thanks.
Thank you. Isn't our sobriety so much about sometimes being painfully aware of what we need? As I like to think about it, to keep my mind right. And many of you probably heard this before. One of my favorite writers, Anne Lamott, who has a active recovery program, talks about her mind. She uses the analogy of the neighborhood. This always stayed with me, and I like to share it as often as I can. So if you've heard it before, you're going to hear it again. And she writes, sometimes my mind is like a very bad neighborhood that no one should enter into alone, especially me. So when I start to feel a lot of discomfort, or just that sense of I'm really suffering, one of the first things I do is I'll like check in, and I imagine if my mind was a neighborhood, would I want my child, my pet, my loved one walking around in there? Like, would they be safe? So I start there, and the answer is usually no way. And then I'll say, well, why is it okay for you to be in there? And what do you need to do to change that landscape so that your own mind feels like it's a safe place to be? I think you used the word, you need mental clarity. I've had periods of time in my life where I've worked with that analogy so much that sometimes my meditation time was spent envisioning what the neighborhood of my own mind would actually look like. When we think about the whole idea of the neighborhood, you know, when I hear the word neighborhood, the first thing I think about is Mr. Rogers. You know, and I think the reason I loved that show so much as a kid was that I just wanted to live there. You know, it didn't matter if it was imaginary or not. And sometimes in periods of a lot of dis-ease for me, I will look up old episodes of Mr. Rogers just to reconnect with that feeling of, like, what was that all about? There was safety. There was somebody there who saw me, who heard me, understood me, who cared about me, really, really felt that. I mean, he was pretty masterful at having viewers, especially children, feel like he was there with you. So what would the neighborhood of your own mind look like if it were a safe place? It's foolish to imagine, to delude ourselves into thinking that our external environment right now is safe. I mean, unlike previous times in history, if you use the war analogy, we knew our enemy. We could see the enemy. We can't see this. And so there are a lot of reasons for us not to feel safe, but how can we come to feel safe in our own minds, in our own relationships? Because it's so necessary right now. That safety and that connection. Someone else, emotionally, what do you need to do? What came up?
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everyone on this sunny morning. So that helps me emotionally. Anyway, I want to go back to the last question on the physical, and because it's connected to the emotional. And I'm going to be honest and say this, my first thing that came to mind when you asked what do I need physically, sex. But I just want to admit that because I know all of you did too. So, but anyway, but as I sat and I thought about the physical, what came to mind was just a hug. And then the emotional is part of my routine during these days of isolation is to help out with my family and my kids, my daughters who are moms and their families, and I take their dog for a walk. And I have a 2-year-old grandson that knows when I'm there somehow because the dog knows when I'm there. So I usually meet the dog at the cellar door, and Rory will come barreling out and just dives like a savage that he is, but he's the sweetest thing in the world, off the cellar step, and I have to catch him. And he gives me this hug. He squeezes me so hard. And, you know, his parents have to forgive the fact that we're making this contact because, hey, it's not my fault. But what it does to me emotionally is it just uplifts me. And to feel the love from this little guy, this unconditional, like, it just gives my whole life purpose for some reason. But because I don't know, I don't think I ever really took them for granted, but it's just amazing what it does to me. Cause, I mean, I'm walking on air after that, you know, truly. So those are things I need, but it was funny because I never had thought of asking what do I need. I'm one of those codependent people that's always reaching out to other people. How you doing? What do you need? But I have learned, and I am learning, to just go with the flow on whatever my emotional state might be, you know. I think I was sharing last week, I sometimes need permission to just have a meltdown, and now I can do that for myself, but I haven't had one in a while. But, you know, for the most part, I'm just kind of going with the ebb and flow with whatever the tidal emotions I have. I have a routine. I walk a lot. So I bought some gym equipment that's here, and like a knucklehead, I didn't, you know, oh, I'll put it together. It's a million nuts and bolts. Holy crap. But anyway, I'll take care of it. So, you know, today it's not bad. It's pretty good. I'm meeting a friend and going for a walk, distance walk. So, and I do that all the time. I meet my spots when they walk. But, I was thinking too, when I need isolation and I try to go into the woods, like I go up in the mountain and I take the dog in the woods, it's packed with people now. So I get upset. All these people encroaching on my territory here. But it's funny because the last several times I've been up on a mountain, I've found people that are lost. So I'm there to help them find their way back. It's kind of, okay, God, I got you, you know. So apparently I've been born to help. So anyway, I could ramble on, but thank you.
That's great. Thank you. You know, when I imagine your grandson jumping into your arms, right? He probably lands like right here against your heart. And when you say, I leave and I'm walking on air, I'm thinking, yeah, you are. You are walking on air, because the physiological, hormonal, and neurological change that occurs, that shifts in us when we are able to embrace heart to heart is real. The stimulation of oxytocin, which is that hormone that is so essential to our ability to survive as human beings. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It runs strongest in us at birth when we are held for the first time. Especially, this is why it's always recommended that a new mother or father holds their child skin to skin. Here, really not about the heartbeat, it's about the generation of oxytocin and the endorphins and serotonin increase that happens in the act of human bodily contact, especially when this the heart space, whatever you want to call it, is actually coming into contact. This is why pets can be really important. This is why many of us feel so good when we're rocking a child or holding a child. It can feel so therapeutic. And it's because you're creating within yourself, you're stimulating those hormones. This is why the physical intimacy of sex can be so powerful, because of the generation of the oxytocin, the serotonin, which makes us feel very connected, which feels good, but also calms us down. It takes us out of stress response. So the things that you're missing and the things that you need and that way that you feel when you go to walk the dog and you've got that child jumping into your arms is, not just sweet in theory. It's changing your body and it's changing your brain. So it's powerful. So I'm gonna go through the next categories all together so we can wrap up our session. So again, I want to give you one more opportunity to just close your eyes. And I want you to think about what you need or most need relationally, what do you most need in terms of play or leisure or lightness? What do you most need in terms of your work in the world? The way that you serve or the job that you do? What do you need in terms of your own creativity? Whenever you're ready, open your eyes. So the physical, the emotional, the relational, the leisure, play, lightness, the professional or your work in the world, and the creative are all aspects of who we are in a really holistic way. And each of these areas of our life come with certain needs that we either meet or not. And some of you might find it strange that creativity is on this list. But as I opened this morning with the notion of curiosity, and curiosity and creativity often sort of travel together. We're born innately curious, we're born innately creative, and then at some point it gets diminished or turned down or, for some of us erased completely. We just get completely cut off from our creativity. And so it's so essential. It's just essential to life fulfillment, but it's also essential to our capacity to solve problems, our capacity to make changes in our life. I was listening to a teacher just on Friday who talked about how this is one of the most tremendous times in our own, probably in our own life history as individuals, where rather than allowing ourselves to be completely slammed by or overwhelmed by and engulfed by stress, to spend part of our time thinking really creatively about how might I live differently? How might I work differently? Like if you allow yourself periods of time during the day to just have to have a curiosity about that. And remember, try to be curious and scared at the same time. Try to be expressing your creativity and being scared at the same time, and see if it works out. So when I was going through all of this early this morning, I thought about the fact that I need to color. And I was the first person to be really critical of the mindfulness coloring books that came out about 3 to 5 years ago, and how popular they were. And a lot of people gave me coloring books during that period of time. And I just put them on a shelf. And about 2 years ago, I just decided, to give it a chance. And I was really surprised at how calming and soothing it was. But how in the act of coloring, my mind got so calm that it was like a rush of insights started coming. So for me, the act of coloring, plus it really reminded me a lot of times in my childhood that felt really good. I forgot how much I love to color. And it also reminded me of aspects of being a mom that I really enjoyed. And I really enjoyed coloring with my kids. So what do you do actively now to express your creativity? And if you ask that part of yourself, the creativity part, what do you most need now? What would it say? So just asking that question this morning, the answer was, oh, you need to color. It might be you need to read a novel. Like, how novel would that be? Allowing yourself to read a novel. Or you need to watch a really good movie, or you need to paint, or you need to, whatever it is, you need to build. So, and that's also tied to leisure and lightness. If you ask that part of yourself that needs a break, lightness, leisure, fun, whatever you want to call it, what comes up? What's the one thing that comes up? So I just want to open it up one last time and just see what resonated with you in that final segment.
So Christine, days and days.
Coloring?
I have a brand new craft table, and I really never put together, but I like how you said you cannot be scared and be curious at the same time. So this is my little bumblebee.
Yeah, see, I mean, that's good for you. That's, yeah, it's, you do more of that.
That's pretty neat. I would have never thought you would have used those words, coloring. It's absolutely part of my sound mind, besides my friends who reassure me and that we're together each day and tell me it's going to be okay. So this is just what I do as well. Yeah. Thanks.
Good. You're welcome. Keep doing it. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Okay. All right, one last thing here. Sorry about these slides are not cooperating. Just a second here. I just want to bring us back. I want to bring you just to this slide and leave you with this today. This is something that really helped me over the course of the last 2 weeks, which is, described as a mindful minute. It's a tool that you can use, especially if you've been feeling overwhelmed. Next week, I'm going to talk a little bit about the very real cognitive shifts that occur in the brain when we're stressed. One of those cognitive shifts that happens is we might find ourselves almost feeling like we have a version of some attention deficit going on. Like we cannot just tend to one thing. I like to say that if you were in my home right now, you would see that I have what I call little fires everywhere. It's actually a name of a Hulu series right now, Little Fires Everywhere, meaning there are piles of little fires everywhere, all of which need to be put out, meaning I need to tend to them, but I'll start here and then 10 minutes later I'm here and I'm just all over the place, which is not characteristic of me, but it is characteristic of a brain that's experiencing some chronic stress. So this was a real game changer for me. And that is to ask yourself, what is most vital for me to put my energy on right now? Or as you're doing something, asking, is this the best use of my energy right now? These questions can clarify what is most essential. So it's helped me considerably to ask these 2 questions. I'll do that as soon as this call is over. One of the inquiries I'll go into is, okay, what is most vital for me to put my energy into for the next couple of hours? Or if I'm doing, engaged in a task, asking, is this where I should be right now? And this helps me to stay focused on what is most essential. There's a really powerful book called Essentialism, and that's essentially, I don't even think you have to read the book because those are kind of the 2 questions that arise, but it really helps you to narrow your focus down so you're just not all over the place. And again, one of the characteristics of a brain that's overwhelmed by chronic stress is losing contact with what's most vital and what's most essential, and just feeling completely all over the place. When you think about what's vital and what's essential, if I can focus on what's most essential, it contributes to my vitality. It contributes to my energy. Trying to deal with little fires everywhere and going from one to the other without completing, without putting one out, is depleting, because I get to the end of the day and I feel like I've not done anything. Or the critical voice comes in, like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you stay focused? So what's essential? What's most vital? Stay with that. Thank you. Good to see all of you. See you next week. Have a good week. Ask yourself often, what do I need? And tend to those things. Okay?
Thanks, Christine.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Be safe and be well, everyone.
You too.
You too, Michael.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.